You have cancer. 3 words that change a life forever. We would like to offer another 3 words. Be an overcomer. Welcome to the 1% Podcast, where our conversations with other cancer warriors, survivors, and caregivers allows us to give you that extra boost you need to face your challenge head on, live life from a new perspective, and forge a path that keeps you moving free and clear. Now, welcome your host and cancer survivor, Truett Taylor.
Welcome to today's episode of the 1% Podcast, the show where we interview young adults who are battling or surviving an unexpected cancer diagnosis. You are not alone, and I promise, by consuming today's content, your soul will be fed with the hope, courage, and inspiration you need to keep fighting for today. I'm excited to be on your journey with you today. If you haven't done so already, be sure to head over to 1%podcast.com to sign up for our email list to see the latest news and updates for all our guests on the show. You can also check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1% Podcast. If you want to join in on some of our discussions, please join our Facebook group, the 1% Podcast. To contact me directly for content, questions, or booking events, you can email me at info@1percentpodcast.com. What's going on, everyone? Truett Taylor back with another exciting episode of the 1% Podcast. This is episode number 56. We are all the way to 56 episodes. Man, I'm so proud of everyone that I've spoken to. I get updates and emails all the time from the people we've had on the show, different things going on in their lives. I'm telling you, the community that's been created from the podcast is so powerful, and I love all the messages that I get. Before I jump into today's interview, I want to let you know that I get tons and tons of emails and DMs every week about people who want to be on the show. So if you know someone out there who's has a great cancer story and is really looking to inspire people and really looking to share, the good and the bad, just the real life version of what their life's like before, during, or after cancer, I'd love for you guys to send them over to me. You can email me at info@1percentpodcast.com, or you can find me on Instagram. It's probably where I'm most active at right now. So let's talk a little bit about today's guest. Today's guest on episode 56 is Miss Allie Moreno. Allie was pregnant with her second child when she was diagnosed with Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. In today's episode, man, she goes into some serious detail on what it was like, what her identity was like, how isolating it was to be pregnant and going through chemotherapy. Man, her story is so great. She shared with me a phenomenal resource that I really want to highlight too, so I wish you guys would go check out. The website's called Hope for Two. That's HOPEFORTWO.org. That's a website. It's a cancer network for pregnant women. I was on their site earlier today, and I was just reading their mission and reading about the founders and about how these 3 ladies got together and really comforted each other through, one of the most difficult times of their life, which should have been one of the happiest moments of their life. All the struggles, all the questions, all the things that they had going on about their cancer, their pregnancy, decisions to make, whether to terminate the pregnancy. Their lives were in jeopardy. There's so many different thoughts and things that go on during that time anyways. Adding cancer to the mix definitely makes it a lot scarier. But I want you guys to go on and check out hopefor2.org. The resources are amazing. If you are a pregnant person out there right now who does have cancer, they'll partner you up with someone who has had the same situation, so you don't have to face that alone. You don't have to feel isolated. It's a great resource. I love connecting with people. I love sharing those kind of resources with everyone. So be sure to go check out hopefor2.org. Now let's jump into my interview with Miss Allie Moreno. Hi, Allie. Welcome to the 1% Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm great, thanks.
Good. Great to have you on as a guest, coming all the way from Houston, Texas. You were just telling me a second ago that you're in the middle of a move. You're about to move into a new home pretty much coming up soon. And got a lot going on right now. So I appreciate you taking time to be on the show. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about who you are and why you think it's important to be on the podcast?
Okay, sure. My name is Allie Moreno. I am 34 years old, and when I was pregnant with my second child, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma during the second trimester. And for me, it was a time that, cancer already makes you feel very isolated. itself. And then as a young adult, on top of that, you're feeling even more isolated. So then as a pregnant young adult going through cancer, it was a very isolated time that is very hard to identify with others. And so, I feel very compelled to kind of share my story because there's not a lot of people out there that get diagnosed with cancer during pregnancy.
That's so true. It's like the trifecta. You were a young adult, you had cancer, and you were all pregnant at the same time. What a wild thing to have as from an identity standpoint. I think we're close to the same age. So we're in our 30s. We're making life happen, right, with the family and everything going on. Then cancer jumps in the middle of that, and you have to reroute everything a little bit. So I can't wait to hear about your story. So why do you think it's important for you to be able to share your story? And maybe there's somebody out there listening who may be pregnant and just got diagnosed with the same thing that you had. Why do you think it's important for them to hear your story?
So I think, when someone is going through pregnancy, a mother, your priorities change. You start to think about others before yourself. And oftentimes you put yourself secondary as a mom. You start sacrificing your sleep, your the way you feel, the things that you can do just so that it's helping care of your baby. When cancer comes along, you kind of get this crossroads of like, okay, do I take care of myself first? I have to undergo all these things that, there's not a lot of information on what are these drugs going to do to my baby? And at the same time, have the best interest of your baby in mind. And it's a delicate balance, between the two of doing what's good for both you and your baby at the same time. And I think it's really important out there for moms to know that it's okay to put your own health first. You're not necessarily over the baby completely, but putting yourself first so that you can be healthy. So then essentially the baby can be healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. I can only imagine how challenging that must be to have that decision to make. Let's talk about a little bit about your life prior to your cancer diagnosis before we really get into all the details of the pregnancy and the cancer. What was Allie's life like prior to the diagnosis of non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Sure. So one of the things that I did that I'm very much so still into is I was a fitness instructor, before I taught group exercise classes. And I was also a personal trainer for a period of time too. And so I was very into, working out, living a healthy lifestyle. That's what I did before I had kids, that consumed most of my time. And then once I had my first child, my daughter, we had a very typical family life, taking my husband and I taking care of our daughter, taking her out to play. All of our kids were having, all of our friends were having kids too. So, we'd meet up with them and have our kids play together. It was just a very, suburban life almost of, life centered around your kids, going to the zoo, going to the park. I still taught fitness classes, just not as much. I thought I ate pretty healthy. I do love food. I still today love food a lot. And so that was what my life was like. I also work, I'm in IT. I don't consider it any sort of, special, extraordinary, unusual life, but it was, it was a really great life.
So when you guys are married and you start having children, how did you see before cancer? How did you see the rest of your life playing out?
I just pictured it in a way, just like a typical life, like nothing super exciting, but nothing dramatic either. Both my parents and my husband's parents were both married for 40 plus years, and counting. They're both still together. So we just envisioned our lives, we'd grow old, we'd have kids, our kids would have kids and that would just be our life.
Yeah. So just the traditional lifestyle. Well, obviously that changed, during your pregnancy. Tell us about the day you were diagnosed. Like what led you to the doctor? Were you having some of the B symptoms that a lot of people mention? And what led you to the doctor? And what was it like hearing those words that you have cancer as you were pregnant?
Okay, sure. So I'll share how it led up to the diagnosis and ultimately when I got diagnosed. So throughout the first trimester of my pregnancy, I always had this feeling like I had to clear my cough, or clear my throat. And I just figured it was allergies. Hurricane Harvey happened in Houston around that time too. So everybody was having bad allergies. I just assumed it was allergies. But then as my pregnancy went along, I started to enter into the second trimester. The cough, it turned into a cough and it started to bother me a little bit more. The cough got stronger. And then I got to a point where like, okay, fine, I'll go to the doctor, right? And the doctor was like, okay, well, maybe it's allergies or it's asthma, let's go see an allergist. Let's try these things. And, I was very adamant with my allergist, I don't want to do anything that's not safe for pregnancy. Let's just do that. So we tried inhalers. We tried antibiotics because we thought it was maybe a sinus infection. I tried all these different allergy pills and nothing seemed to get better. And with each week, it only got worse and worse. And this cough just got stronger and stronger, to the point where I actually fractured a rib because I was coughing so strongly. And I mentioned to you before, I taught fitness classes and I was going up a flight of stairs at work and I would be totally winded by it, which is unusual because in my last pregnancy, I was, weightlifting till I was 38 weeks pregnant. So I knew this was not normal. And I kept having this mindset of like, well, I only want to try these medications that are safe for the baby. I don't want to, try anything else. And then I went back to see my doctor and he was like, well, we've tried all these things, you need to get a chest x-ray. And I was just like shocked. Like, why would you even suggest a chest x-ray? Like pregnant women don't get x-rays. That's, I thought it was silly almost that he would suggest that. But he was like, we're at a point where you're not getting better. Your quality of life is not great. And, they also talked to my OB and my OB said, no, you can do a chest x-ray because, you're in your second trimester. We're not doing anything that's going to have the baby, within the radiation boundaries. So I finally caved, and got the chest x-ray just out of like, okay, I feel miserable. I can't last this long through my pregnancy. I was secretly hoping that the pregnancy would, I'd deliver the baby and the sickness would all go away.
Right.
So anyway, I got the x-ray and within about an hour or two, I got a call from the doctor and the doctor's like, you have something huge in your chest cavity and I can't tell what it is. You need to get a CT scan. Well, the CT scan has, way more radiation to it. And after getting clearance from my OB that, yes, we need to do this. It's a priority, even though we realize the risk versus, benefit. We need to do this for your health. I got the CT scan and that's when they found that there was this huge tumor in my chest. It was about 16 centimeters. I mean, that's pretty massive of size that's been growing in me. And, I didn't really know what to think of it. I was like, can we cut it out or, is there surgery I can do or something? And finally, I got connected to an oncologist at MD Anderson through my primary care doctor. And she basically said, you want this to be cancer because it would actually be easier to get rid of this tumor through chemo than to do some sort of intricate surgery involving your lungs and your heart, And I was shocked to hear that. Like, okay, I want this to be cancer. And then, of course, me being like any other person, I went home and Googled lymphoma. And of course, every symptom I read, it was exactly what I had. So in my mind, I was already like, okay, this sounds like what I have. And in a way, so, I was kind of accepting it. I got a biopsy done and then and it was the week of Thanksgiving actually. And then we just waited for the biopsy results. So it was actually, I remember being at work, expecting the call because they said it would take about a week. And then I got the call. And where I work at, we have an open office concept, meaning not a single person in the office has an office. They sit at a desk, even the CEO. So there is absolutely zero privacy at this office. So I sat in a conference room with glass walls trying to have a private conversation. And I remember the oncologist telling me, yes, this is primary mediastinal large B-cell lymphoma. And explained to me, like, you need to start chemo and we need to see a lymphoma specialist and we need to switch you to a maternal fetal medicine specialist for your baby. And I remember just in a way thinking like, okay, this is kind of relieving that I know what I have and we know what we're going to do about it. But the second time, like my world was spinning, like thinking, am I ever going to see this baby? Am I going to make it through this pregnancy? What is life going to be like? And I was trying to, look normal, in a glass wall conference room. And I just had to, after I got off the phone, I just had to pause and, I left work that day because I couldn't focus and pretend like nothing was happening, So, it was just relief on one hand. On the other hand, just kind of like thinking, what are all the things that need to happen for me to be better?
Right. So you have an initial shock when you first hear the news, right? And then you start picking apart little pieces of it. What was your biggest worry once you received the diagnosis?
I think my biggest fear, I'd always told my husband from the beginning, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm more afraid of my daughter and then my possibly soon to be son not having a mother. That was my biggest fear. Like I can tolerate pain, but I can't imagine my children not having a mother.
Mm-hmm. What is the hardest thing to think about whenever you start thinking about that moment?
Just that, what if I can't get through this? What is my likelihood of surviving? Am I getting the best treatment possible? Am I making the right choices? Because, when I found out, I didn't have a lot of time to think about it. People, doctors pretty much told me, you need to start chemo. Like, I got diagnosed on a Tuesday. Mm-hmm. I started chemo on the following Monday. I mean, I had no time to think about it. Like, they just told me, you need to do this. Like, you can't wait. Mm-hmm. So just hoping that I was making the right decisions, and, and there was a lot of cloudiness in our heads. When you get diagnosed, we don't think straight. And so I didn't have time to really doubt myself or hesitate either.
What was your husband's reaction when you decided that you were going to take chemo while you were pregnant?
Well, I think he was also like me, where, we had to just trust what the doctors were telling us. It really, in a way, it wasn't a choice. It was like, they pretty much told us, you're doing this, that this is what you need to do in order for both of you to survive. And I think we just looked at it as like, we have to do this for the sake of our family, so that I can live, longer, and then our daughter can have a mother, and then we can see our baby being born.
Mm-hmm. And how far along pregnant were you at the time?
I was 22 weeks pregnant when I was diagnosed.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your treatment cycle. What kind of chemo were they giving you at 22 weeks pregnant?
Okay. So I got R-CHOP chemotherapy, and that is actually not the gold standard of my diagnosis. Typically, someone with my diagnosis would get R-EPOC, and which has an additional, the letter E drug, which we don't even be able to tell you what it's called, but it has an additional drug. And but because R-EPOC is not tested and known how the effects would be on pregnancy, they opted not to do it. R-CHOP has been used on pregnant women before, so they opted for that instead. And then I would also have to have radiation in lieu. So if I had R-EPOC, I wouldn't have to have radiation. But because I couldn't have that, I had R-CHOP with radiation instead as my treatment plan.
So what kind of side effects do you get from the R-CHOP?
So you have the typical, cancer side effects, which are, hair loss, chemo brain, neuropathy. There's nausea, fatigue. Your nails, go kind of black. I was very, very fortunate, and I got pretty minimal side effects. I still got the hair loss. I couldn't escape that one, but I had no nausea. My energy level was pretty good. There was a couple days I was a little tired, but it wasn't anything to totally take me out for the day. And I had some neuropathy that lasted a while. I had chemo brain, which was compounded with pregnancy brain and mom brain. So I was very, very forgetful and didn't know where I was half the time, I think. Yeah. But I was very lucky that, I had a really good appetite the whole time even going through chemo, even with the prednisone helping me to eat more. And I didn't feel weak that often. I felt pretty normal, the most part. One thing that, the chemo did do to me is I did become neutropenic. And I think most cancer patients these days, they get Neulasta after they're done with treatment. The next day you get your little injection, and that's supposed to help keep your counts up. Neulasta, my oncologists were not comfortable giving me Neulasta. They didn't have enough information indicating it was okay for pregnancy. So instead I got Neupogen injections as needed. So we would have to wait for me to hit a neutropenic state, and then I would get the injections every day until the counts went up. So that was a little bit worrisome, because it was like at any given time, I don't know if I was walking around just waiting to get, severely sick. Right. With each chemo cycle, we kind of learned when that time happened. What didn't help is during that time, I got sick during cold and flu season. So I started chemo in December, and I was pretty much like out of sight from everybody. I wore a mask all the time. I hand sanitized like crazy. I did not want to risk getting sick at all. My best friend actually works at the emergency center at MD Anderson. So she sees every sick person that comes in from cancer. And she kind of warned me, like, this is what you don't want to get. I see what happens when people do get sick during treatment. Right. So I was very concerned about that, and that made me even more isolated from not wanting to be around people, to risk getting sick.
So let's talk about your identity for a second. So here you are, pregnant with your second child, expecting things to go well. All of a sudden at 22 weeks, you got diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So here you are, pregnant with cancer. Now you're starting treatment. What did that do to your identity? Did you have a hard time figuring out what was important, like what steps to take, who you were as a 34-year-old? What was going on in your head at that time?
So I think what was really difficult at that time is allowing others to help me. I'm a very independent person. As a mom to my daughter, I was the one that was, my husband helped, of course, a ton, but, I was always taking the initiative to, I'll change her diaper, or let me prepare her food, or let me do this, with her. And, now, she was in daycare. So it was like, I had to be hands off from our household, from a person who was previously very hands on. Mm-hmm. Likewise, I couldn't be the person that was, taking care of the house, cleaning things and overexerting myself. And I don't like to sit still, I'm very active. So I think it forced me in a way to take a break. And I actually, during my whole cancer process, it made me realize, there's a lot of times in my past, I had caught myself kind of saying like, oh, when am I going to catch a break? I'm so tired from, this or that, like, why won't my kids sleep? Or I just want to take a nap too, or, something like that. And in a way, it was like this kind of taught me a lesson of like, okay, now you get your break. You can't do any of this because, you might get sick from it. For, right? Exactly. And so it made me really appreciate, never being too busy for my children and to do things for my family. So it definitely changed my outlook on that of, allowing others to help me. And then also at the same time, appreciating that I do get to do things, even if sometimes they're not fun things to do.
Right. So I really like to go into people's lowest moment, because we all have that moment where maybe we're questioning why this happened to us, or we get caught up in the reality of everything hits kind of all at once, whether it's you have cancer, am I going to survive, all of those things. Everybody processes it differently. What would you say was your absolute lowest moment? It could be emotionally, physically, maybe financially, spiritually. What was your lowest moment that you had that you can remember during your treatment?
I think there was a lot of ups and downs, and quite a few memorable ones. But I think the one that stands out to me the most is probably about midway through my treatment. So I had 6 treatments total of chemo. And about midway through, it was just like, this was getting old. I think in the beginning, I was kind of hyped up, like, all right, I'm gonna get treatment. I know exactly what's wrong with me. I'm gonna start feeling better. And even after the first chemo, I was already feeling better. My symptoms were way improved. But after the third one, it was starting, the chemo starts to wear you out. And at the same time too, this being in hiding all the time, not being able to see friends or family, and missing out on just simple things in life, like, birthday parties and family get-togethers. That was also kind of, compounding too. And it just felt like, 3 more chemo treatments just felt so far away. And then, delivering the baby just felt so far away of just like, how much longer can I sustain living like this? And I've been trying to be strong, like for the past 3 treatments, but now 3 more to go. And I don't know if I can make it anymore. I think that was one of the low points of my journey, of just thinking like, okay, can I get through the rest of this? Is the finish line ever going to be near? And I actually didn't know about my radiation treatment until about halfway through my chemo. I thought I was just going to have chemo. And then when I found out I was going to have radiation as well, it was just like, okay, when am I ever going to be done? It's just dragging this out longer and longer.
How did you overcome that low moment because our mind takes us places, and, that's the way bad things start. We start, inquiring, fantasizing about things. And then next thing you know, we start believing a lie, right? We start believing the reality that's not even here, all the things that we've worried about. How were you able to overcome those moments where, you had been isolated because you didn't want to get sick, you've lost your hair, you're trying to make sure that you're doing everything that you can to, get better and to have a healthy pregnancy. How did you overcome maybe some of those low moments that you were having?
When I caught myself feeling sorry for myself a lot, like I absolutely hated feeling sorry for myself. I felt like, why am I thinking this way? Because there's nothing beneficial about having this mindset at all, right? And I recall reading at the beginning of my treatment that I think on the MD Anderson website that like 70 or 80% of people who go through cancer go through depression as well. Mm-hmm. And I just remember thinking like, I don't want to be one of those people. Like, you know, statistically speaking, I may very well be, right? But I don't want to be that. And I remember just telling myself, okay, if I ever catch myself feeling this way, I'm going to tell somebody so that I don't internalize this. So I would talk to my husband about it, and, you know, I'd be frustrated and I would cry and tell him like, I don't know if I can do it anymore. It just seems so far away. And he would actually remind me of how good things have been going. Mm-hmm. Like he would remind me, he like tell me, hey, do you remember that just 3 treatments ago, you couldn't even walk up a flight of stairs and you were in pain all the time. You couldn't even sleep, you know, and now your cough is nearly gone, you know, and just remind me of how great things were going, that I was, you know, still exercising every day. I was hardly having any nausea from chemo, and compared to, you know, other horror stories we hear, right? And he kind of reminded me of like, actually, I have a lot of good things going. And if chemo is going this great, then the next 3 are going to be a breeze. So he just kind of had to shift my mindset on how things were going. And I had to just remember, okay, it's actually pretty good. And I really, you know, should be happy that it's going this great.
Good. So it sounds like to me the reminder, and I talk about that a lot. We have to be taught or reminded things. And it was great that he could see those moments to remind you of and to really refresh your memory. Because again, when you get caught in the moment, and we all do this, we get caught in the moment where we go down that rabbit hole of thoughts of giving up and everything horrible that the internet tells us that can happen that we all look up, right? We get to that point, and it takes someone great to come, or just sometimes it's someone random that comes into your life. And I like to call those 1% moments, where people come into your life and really provide you with that little piece, that little nugget of information you need to remember, or either to teach you one small thing to get you out of that moment. So I think that's awesome. How, you know, since you've had your treatment, you know, and went through this big ordeal with cancer, what do you feel like it did with your marriage? Do you feel like it made it stronger, made you guys communicate better?
I definitely feel that our marriage is so much stronger. You know, we've survived something massive that, you know, my husband shouldered, you know, being both mom and dad for our household, for our daughter. It definitely strengthened things. On top of that, it just made me realize like truly how selfless someone can be for you. And they do it without even thinking about it, you know, without even a hesitation. There. And it makes me confident that, okay, if we survive this, we can survive anything. Like, so you mentioned earlier, we're moving to a new house, and yeah, moving with 2 small children is pretty tough, and trying to sell your home and get it clean and everything. And so I always tell myself, okay, we did cancer. This is like moving to a new house is like nothing.
So you finished up treatment on when?
I finished treatment, chemo, I finished on April 5th, 2018. And then I finished radiation on May 25th, 2018, right before Memorial Day.
So how's your life been since then?
So I am crazy, and I went back to work the following week because my maternity leave ended. So I finished my radiation just in time of my maternity leave, and I went back to work. And, you know, I wanted to go back to work to just help me get back into the swing of things. You know, my doctors asked me, do you need more time off? And I kind of just said, you know, if I took time off, what would I really be doing? You know, and let me just go back into things and see people and see how life is going to be like now. And for the most part, you know, I think that I've adapted pretty well. There were a few challenges I had. I did have a lot of chemo brain, and I had a very, very sharp memory before. I never had to write things down or do to-do lists. I just remembered things. And after the chemo, I had to find ways of improving that. You know, I didn't want to be forgetful at work, so I made to-do lists all the time. I did a lot of brain teaser type stuff like crossword puzzles and Sudoku to help exercise my brain. It helped, I think. You know, I did get back into teaching fitness classes as well. I only teach once a week now. And I just told myself, you know, to be really gentle on myself. And, you know, I don't know how my body's going to be. It's been through a lot. And I don't hold any expectations of myself, you know, when working out anymore. And I just, you know, tell myself, let's just see what happens if you try. You know, worst case happens, you can't do it, and maybe you'll do it later. And it's worked out pretty well. I think, you know, now almost being a year out of chemo, I'm back to, you know, working out almost at the same level as I was before. And I think in a way it makes me relatable to my students in my class, that they see me, starting over, and a lot of them are beginners too, of, their wellness journey. And I think that it just shows that, we're all human, even the person that's teaching the class, that's the role model of the class. We're all human and we start somewhere. So, my hair is finally growing back. I think it is actually growing back thicker. So I am happy about that part too. So
that's awesome. And I think that's great that you said people can look at you as an inspiration, not just as the instructor of your class, but someone who had to start over as well. I think that goes a long way, especially the vulnerability that you have to be able to share your story, and people can look at your life and really, I have a whole lesson I love to talk about when it comes down to how we learn. Some people, just hear things and it makes them feel good for a moment. But the people that hear things and actually go do something are the people who you can tell really want to progress in life. And for people to hear your story and want to show up to those classes that they may feel embarrassed about from the very beginning when they're on their wellness journey and they're not quite where they want to be physically, they can see someone who had to completely start from scratch, who could have potentially lost their life, and their child lost their life as well too. And they see you as an inspiration. So I think that speaks volumes about you and what you're able to do. If you had some advice for a young adult listening right now, let's say there's a 34-year-old female out there now who just got diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, what are one or two things that you would tell her as she's starting to just embrace this journey of cancer?
I think one of the things I would tell, or anybody going through cancer really, is after you go through cancer, even though it's probably one of the darkest moments of your life, in a really strange way, when you go through the darkest moments of your life, you also are able to experience the greatest joys of your life too. It's like you have a new definition of both sadness and joy, right? Now you have different frames of reference. And once you're done with all this, you're going to be living your best life. You're going to just love everything way more than you did before. You're going to appreciate things in your life way more and just have a newfound perspective, and you'll really be truly living. I mentioned before that I just felt my life was just, pretty basic. It was just a normal life, go to work, take care of my kids, have family time and all that. And now it's just, I just cherish it so much more. It's just that much more special. And I think the other thing too is that this is just a really small part of your life, that I know that it seems like it's consuming everything when you're going through it. And it's not to say that this is not something that's a big deal, but it will pass and you will once again feel human and move on to a beautiful life.
I love that. Give people something to look forward to. Allie, why don't you tell us a little bit about the support that you received? Was there any kind of organization or anybody that you reached out to help you during your time?
Yeah. So as I was diagnosed and I started to look online to see where I could get more information about, being pregnant and having cancer, I found a nonprofit called Hope for Two. And as I read through their website, they help connect women going through cancer while pregnant with other women who have survived the process. So I had a support woman assigned to me within 24 hours, and she went through the same type of cancer as I did, and she was also in the same time zone as me, which made it really easy for us to communicate. And I could reach out to her via email, or I could call her if I wanted and just talk to her about any questions I had or feelings I'd have going on, anything like that. She was a great help with the whole chemo process of what to expect. She also happened to be a nurse as well, so she had kind of the medical point of view, which was also really great. But, she just kind of told me about what to expect, what happened with her baby. And her daughter's 10 years old now. It was so relieving to know that, she made it through.
I'll put a link to Hope for Two into the show notes as well, so people can go back and check that out. One of the last questions I typically ask people is, what is the best thing that cancer's done for you? And you've kind of answered this already a little bit, but if you had to sum it up in one sentence, what would you say is the best thing that cancer did for your life?
It allowed me to experience the greatest joys of my life as well. Not necessarily during the treatment, but afterwards, my life that I'm able to really live.
Well, I want to acknowledge you for a second for coming on the show. We've talked a little bit before about different things, but the very fact that you are vulnerable enough to share your story is one thing that I think is really important, because you mentioned something earlier, and I found myself in the same situation. Is once you get diagnosed, you don't really know of a lot of people who have had the same thing that's happened to you. So for you to come on the podcast and be able to share your story, I think is tremendous. The vulnerability that you have, the determination, I can hear it in your voice as you're talking, and I can probably imagine how you teach your classes as well, as far as being very motivational and really keeping everyone going and excited. And it sounded like that self-talk really transpired into your diagnosis as well. Like you didn't want to give up. Your husband may have to remind you a little bit along the way, but you didn't really want to give up, and you wanted to push through this. And the very fact that you have such a clear, positive story to tell people now, and your desire to tell your story, I think is really amazing. And I love what you're doing now. And I'm just excited to see where your story is going to travel to, not just from the show here, but from your blog that you have and everything else. Why don't you tell all of our listeners the best way they can connect with you?
Yeah, if they want to read all about my journey, it's twostrong.org, TWO, strong.org. And they can also email me at twostrong.org@gmail.com.
Perfect. So I'm going to put links to those in the show notes so people can just click on those and go right to your blog and right to your email. Allie, thank you again for taking time today and being on the show. I'm excited to see how your journey is going to go along, and I can't wait to see some photos of your now 1-year-old, right?
Yeah, he just turned 1 this past weekend. So it was a big deal.
Perfect. Well, thanks again for being on the show, and we will chat with you soon, okay?
Thank you.
We appreciate you spending time with us on today's episode and encourage you to continue the conversation to help you keep pushing forward. For more resources based on today's episode, as well as ways to recommend a guest and connect to Truett personally, head over to 1%podcast.com. Be sure to join us next time for more stories of inspiration right here with Truett Taylor on the 1% Podcast.